Hey everyone, I'm Cary Smith and I'm sitting here with Amar Shah, and we're both with Client First Capital. And Amar, today we have a topic that I think is on a lot of people's minds. It's about cars, and basically it's, should I lease or should I buy?
I
And
think I think
go
that's a
ahead.
great question,
I
right?
think
It's like
so.
I still ask myself that all the time. It's and in retirement, I think the stakes couldn't be higher in terms of
Right.
like the financial cost and the burden. But and I think both you and I recently have kind of looked at cars, right?
I was going to say, you and I actually are on each side of this equation,
Yeah,
right? So I recently, in retirement, bought a new car within the last 2 months. You're not retired, right?
yeah,
But you recently leased a car, and so yeah. So I think there's a lot to talk about here.
yeah. So let's first talk about like the pros and cons of buying and owning a car versus leasing a car. Look, my mom has owned a 2009 Lexus RX uh, up until this last year. And I think a lot of people that we work with have bought and held on to cars, right? And I think one of the pros of that is that you're amortized the cost per mile over a longer period of time,
Hmm.
right? So that cost per mile is well, first of all, there's no mileage restrictions, but that cost per mile gets lower the longer you own the car,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
Um, and there's a lot of savings when that cost is drastically reduced. But I think there's another problem is that once you own a car for so long, you got two problems. One, there's a lot more repairs. There's a
Right.
lot more maintenance that goes into it. That takes time from away from doing the activities that you want to do, or puts that burden on a generation two to go figure out what's wrong with mom and dad's car, take it
Yeah.
to the auto dealer, get it fixed, and then coming back, right? And so there's some headaches there, if you will. But then also, when you're ready to get a new car, your car's not worth anything, and then you
Right.
may have a larger upfront cost,
Yeah.
right?
That's right.
And you think, if people on average, let's just say, hold their car for every 10 years and you're in retirement, you have a potential for getting a car at, let's say you start off with a brand new car at age 60, 70, 80, 90. So you may have two or three more new cars ahead of you.
Yeah. So a lot of good points in there. Amar, I tend to be, probably not as buy and hold as much as your mom, but
Yeah.
when I look at myself historically, 8 to 10 years is about how long I drive a car,
Yeah.
right? But even then, when I'm selling a car that's 8, 9, 10 years old, it's lost most of its value, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll get a
Exactly.
little bit, but there's not a lot of there's not near as much value in it.
Especially looking at like depreciation schedules of cars and stuff like that, you can see that most of the value of the new car is taken out in those earlier years, and then the later years the depreciation tends to level out. So when we look at leasing, I mean, leasing, you don't have a huge upfront payment for a car, you just have lower monthly payments, right?
That's right.
You have, I would say, for retirees, the latest and greatest updates with safety technology, right? Like
Mhm.
you get the new bells and whistles about like protection and stuff. Um, the new car that we have, which is a Chevy Blazer EV, the seat vibrates if like there's somebody walking behind you and you have reverse on, or if you are trying to you have your turn indicator on but there's somebody in your blind spot, the seat will vibrate.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool, even for somebody not in retirement to have that technology. I think some of the negatives that we've heard about leases is that there's mileage limits, there's
Mhm.
um, potentially fees for like damage done to a car, um, and you just never own the car. You're perpetually like leasing, so
That's
to
right.
speak. Yeah,
Yeah, when the lease is over, you have no trade-in value or anything that you've accumulated along the way, right? And then yeah, people fear the dealer, hitting them for every little scratch or mark that's on there, right? I think there are some dealerships that do that, but for the most part, it's usually not too bad of an experience.
Yeah, and maybe that's something to highlight is that at the end of the lease, there's a already negotiated purchase price of the car. During COVID, or like our car before COVID was leased. It was a Ford Expedition, and then during COVID, we actually built $20,000 in equity in the car, meaning that if we would have taken the car to CarMax, they would have written us a check for $20,000 to take over our lease.
Yeah.
Right. And the car. And so it's not always bad, right? It could, it depends on, what the current environment is, what people are gravitating for, supply and demand economics, and your pre-negotiated price could be more than what the current market value is, or it could be less, right? And so that gives you some optionality, I would say, at that point.
It does. I would say also leasing, especially if you're leasing new technology, and I'll use you for example. You got an EV, right? But let's just say, new technology hits the street that makes that EV a little bit obsolete because there's new EV power. You don't
new batteries or new technology.
Yeah. So you don't own the risk of that technology becoming obsolete. The dealer owns that risk, right? And because you have a lease, you can give the car back at the end of that lease, right? And so you are kind of insulating yourself from some of the risk of new technology or other factors that could devalue the car.
Yeah. When dealers or manufacturers are looking to move cars, a lot of times you can find really good values in leases. And I can just share my lease here on this Chevy. The thing went away here. Let me find it real quick. So the lease option for this car, because I guess GM is trying to get rid of the EVs from 2024. Right now we're in 2025, March of 2025. I was able to get, a brand new car, 10,000 miles a year for less than $2,000, right? So you can do a single pay and you just pay up front. And so they're practically giving away the car at that point, right? And for my family, the advantage of getting this car was that our Ford Expedition, the big car that we have, that gas mileage is horrendous. and just looking at the cost savings on gas, we're able to afford another car that we can put around the town in, and so that works out for us. So let's change our lens to retirees, right? Okay. So what should they be considering in this?
Well, I think for retirees, you have a lot of considerations, and part of it might be, kind of who you are and what do you like. But, when I think of the best cars for retirees, sedans typically are a little more comfortable and a little more fuel efficient. And so you'll see a lot of retirees, in some type of car or sedan. They also, it's such a good time to be buying a car because there's so many good quality brands, good pricing, and really good options. But sedans, definitely a direction that people go. But some people that, especially if they tend to be a little more outdoorsy, they like your SUVs and crossovers, right? Because they can get off paved roads a little bit, and if they like camping or biking or fishing, and or if they need to tow something, right? It can be helpful. But also some retirees, and I see this a lot. I live in the Scottsdale area. You have a lot of people who, they're not using this car to get out and about out of town. They're going to the golf course, to the tennis court, to the pickleball, right, to dinner, and they use the car in town. And for those, hybrids and electric cars are tremendous options, right? And so 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 you have those choices as well. And then, I mentioned I'm in Scottsdale, so you have luxury options versus, budget friendly options. I see a little more of the luxury options for retirees here in Scottsdale, and not as much of the budget friendly. But either way, even on the budget friendly cars, there's a lot of them that are stylish and very reliable, right? And so there's just a lot of options these days, and and not everyone's the same. So if you're retired, I think you have a lot of options that are not going to break your retirement.
Yeah. And I think it's, with my tenure at USAA, I work
Mhm.
with a lot of pilots. And
Right.
it's interesting to see how many 65 and 70-year-olds still want to have a Corvette that they can barely get into. And then they go into a sedan. And then they go into like a crossover SUV. As getting down gets harder to come. So it could be also a mobility piece as well in that.
Could be mobility, but those pilots, they continue to have a need for speed, right? Even after they're not
Yeah.
flying, constantly anymore. And so, yeah, you do see that.
Yeah. And then I think another factor is you got to figure out your liquidity, right? Like
Mhm.
if you have cash on hand, then purchasing a car, regardless of the market cycle, could make sense. If you don't have as much cash on hand and you have to take money out of a portfolio, let's say if the markets are down and
Mhm.
you're taking a large chunk out, then you're digging a slightly deeper hole, if you will, and so that may hurt your financial portfolio stress, if you will. If you're leasing, it's a payment, right? So it's probably
Sure.
less stress on your portfolio because it's a smaller payment spread over time. If you look at leases and you can negotiate like a single pay, or if you can negotiate like uh, the purchase price of the car after, right? You
Mhm.
can work with those numbers. That could provide you with some more flexibility from a financial perspective. Also considering taxes, right? If all your money is in an IRA and you have to take it, you're going to pay taxes on that distribution. Now you're in a higher tax bracket. May throw off a IRMA potentially, right?
Mhm.
So it's not just so once you've identified what type of car is a good car, determining if you should purchase it or lease it could also be a good part of that. A lot of children of the Depression era are always trying to maximize financial value of assets. That's what's
Mhm.
ingrained in their head. And you may want to consider, hey, at this time, safety is the most important part. Like with my mom with this 2009 car, it's like, hey, you're driving your grandchildren around. We would prefer if you had a safer car, right? So some of those things kind of can play into that.
Yeah.
Especially another thing to consider if you're snowbirds, right? If you're in two different parts of the country, right? You're not going to be putting a ton of miles on these cars. Or if you're early into retirement and you have a heavy travel schedule because you want to do all these things that you weren't able to do in your working years, your car's not going to get as much use. So these are all different factors to
Mhm.
consider when you're deciding whether to buy or lease. Um, and then obviously the maintenance part, which we talked about earlier. Do you have the time? Is that something that you're interested in? And some people like working on cars and
Yeah.
maybe like changing the oil, and it keeps them active. But I think this is good. If you like our content, please like and subscribe to our videos. You can also visit us on our website where we have a free monthly newsletter that goes out. And if you have questions about your own situation, please reach out to us. Thank you, Cary.
All right, Amar. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.